Change is everywhere, from the development of positive train control, to autonomous trucks, to even possible mergers. If you look closely, it's happening everywhere around you. Today, I'm going to be talking about the merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, and the pros and cons of the merger blockbuster that has been happening in the recent days. So let's get started. So we're starting in the magazine, November 2025. CPKC CEO says Union Pacific's proposed $85 billion acquisition of Norfolk Southern is a nationwide service disaster waiting to happen, and an endgame scenario for the rail industry. Retired Norfolk Southern CEO says the story of railroading has always been the story of mergers and expansion. Their blockbuster deal is a game changer, the spark required to ignite growth in an industry that has seen precious little since traffic peaked in 2006. They say the combination of the 32,880-mile Union Pacific and 19,335-mile Norfolk Southern will attract freight by eliminating problematic interchanges, speeding and simplifying service, and tapping the so-called watershed markets along the Mississippi River, where rail is not competitive today. The CEOs also say the merger will boost the U.S. economy, support a revival of domestic manufacturing, make American companies more competitive in global markets, and preserve and create jobs for unionized railroaders. Shippers and rail labor, however, are wary. The National Industrial Transportation League said shippers would not support a transcontinental railroad deal unless it improves service, pricing, and competition. The largest rail union said it would oppose the merger and scoured Union Pacific strategies, operations, and labor relations practices. The fate of the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern combo sits with the STB and its untested rules, which require a Class 1 combination to enhance rail competition and be in the public interest. The railroads insist the merger will be able to clear those hurdles and usher in a new era of growth. They're banking on the big road creating $4 billion in synergies, including $3 billion in revenue from new traffic and $1 billion in cost and productivity savings. Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern would bring different strengths to a combined 52,215-mile system. Union Pacific boasts the industry's largest carload network, anchored by its crown jewel, dominant access to Gulf Coast petrochemical plants, and their lucrative chemical traffic. Norfolk Southern, however, operates the largest intermodal network in the East, including superior access to the distribution center network in eastern Pennsylvania, which supplies retailers and their big box stores from the New York metro area to Washington. A Union Pacific-Norfolk Southern merger would also put together strong automotive networks. Norfolk Southern originates more finished vehicles traffic than any other railroad. Union Pacific is the #1 auto carrier in the West and reaches all major gateways with Mexico. With single-line service, they could avoid interchanges that currently rely on the Indiana Harbor Belt and Belt Railway of Chicago, as well as the Alton and Southern in St. Louis. The combined system also could link parts, suppliers, and assembly plants in the Midwest and southeast with those in Texas and Mexico. Today, Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern exchange roughly 1 million carloads per year, or 6% of their combined volume. As each other's largest interchange partners, they swap traffic at 6 gateways where their networks touch: Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, Memphis, Shreveport, Los Angeles, Shreveport, Louisiana, and New Orleans. As a single network, these gateways become seamless through routes rather than friction points. Transit times will drop by up to 48 hours for carload business, while the merged system will be able to eliminate costly and inefficient crosstown rubber tire moves for intermodal traffic in Chicago and Memphis. Transcontinental system will create opportunities for more efficient routes by eliminating the length of haul and revenue sharing decisions that currently come play when two railroads are involved. And that means that the merger, if approved, would funnel switching work and some through traffic out of Chicago. Details of how Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern operations will mesh won't be available until they file their merger application. Perhaps as early as October, but current and former railroad executives say that Norfolk Southern's former Wabash underutilized routes linking Kansas City and St. Louis with Detroit could emerge as a winner. The merger would put 3 of the top 4 domestic intermodal providers in an awkward spot. J.B. Hunt Snyder and STG Logistics would have their tents pitched in the wrong camp in the east. J.B. Hunt, the largest domestic truckload intermodal operator, uses BNSF in the west and relies primarily on Norfolk Southern in the east. Containers for number 3 operator Schneider and number 4 STG Logistics ride Union Pacific trains in the west and CSXs in the east. If these arrangements stuck, the companies would be unable to tap the benefits of coast-to-coast single-line service. Their rival number 2 Hub Group sits in the sweet spot, already using both Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. So, the $85 billion question is whether the STB will approve the merger. The forecasts of Wall Street analysis vary widely, with odds ranging from 25% to 75%. The reality is that no one really knows. Getting it right will involve heavy lifting, weighing the pros and cons of Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, as well as further consolidation. And that ensures the STB's review won't just be about the Union Pacific acquisition of Norfolk Southern. It will be about the future of the North American rail network. This does not just affect Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. They both know this. The regulator knows this. We all know this. This might likely trigger additional industry consolidation, an endgame scenario. And then something that came off of that is also in this magazine. Where is it? It's really cool when things like this come up. Aha, there it is. BNSF and CSX in August announced an intermodal partnership that will offer seamless domestic coast-to-coast service, plus new international service linking BNSF's Kansas City terminal with CSX ports on the East Coast. The move came a little more than 3 weeks after Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern unveiled plans to merge into the first U.S. transcontinental railroad. But a CSX spokesman said the railroads have been working on their agreement for months. They said they would introduce direct domestic intermodal service between Southern California and Charlotte, North Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. Service also will be launched between Phoenix and Atlanta. The seamless service, the railroad said, will aim to convert over-the-road freight to rail. In addition, the railroads plan to offer new direct international intermodal services linking Kansas City with the ports of New York and New Jersey and Norfolk, Virginia. This collaboration between BNSF and CSX demonstrates the power of partnership, delivering greater flexibility, efficiency, and value for our customers. We are looking forward to these offerings, providing immediate, streamlined service to the supply chain across key markets nationwide. CSX spokesman said, the interline agreement with BNSF is unrelated to the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern merger. I can understand why, in the current context, why people might make that leap. However, let me be clear, this should not be interpreted as a reaction to anything. This is simply two railroads working together as we work together all the time, and is no different than our SMX announcement in July. Referring to the joint Southeast Mexico service launched with Canadian Pacific Kansas City through their new interchange at Myrtlewood, Alabama. Interline agreements like this are common, and we've worked on this particular agreement for many months. The Surface Transportation Board's tougher 2001 merger review rules note interline partnerships can produce merger-like efficiencies without the risk of integration. Delayed service meltdowns like those that accompanied the Union Pacific Southern Pacific merger and the Norfolk Southern CSX carve-up of Conrail. The rules also say that the board will weigh whether claimed merger benefits can be achieved through cooperative agreements among carriers short of a merger. Given the size of the transactions with which we may be faced and the dangers involved should these transactions fail, we will scrutinize claimed merger benefits very closely. They said, the new intermodal service will, quote, offer immediate value for customers by increasing flexibility and optionality, while delivering integrated service for freight moving across the U.S. The BNSF and CSX deal should show that railroads can solve the intermodal interchange problem without a merger. The lanes into the southeast are long-haul lanes that rightfully should be primed for intermodal. Atlanta has 2,200 highway miles, he says. The interline agreement was no surprise. The recently announced Union Pacific Norfolk merger proposal has obviously pushed BNSF and CSX into each other's arms, and it's much easier to collaborate and trust each other when there's a common enemy. This is completely rational and was expected. now, we'll take a step back, go into October. Union Pacific's historic $85 billion deal to acquire Norfolk Southern and create the first U.S. transcontinental railroad likely will set off a final wave of railroad mergers. The merged company, to be called Union Pacific and based in Omaha, Nebraska, will transform the U.S. supply chain and economy, strengthen domestic manufacturing, and preserve all union jobs, the railroad said in their July 29th announcement. Railroads have been an integral part of building America since the Industrial Revolution, and this transaction is the next step in advancing the industry. If the deal gains regulatory approval, the railroad will stretch 52,215 route miles with track winding through 43 states from the East Coast to the West Coast, and serving around 100 ports. Based on 2024 data, the combined railroad would generate $36 billion in revenue, handle 15.3 million carloads in intermodal shipments, have a 52,023 employee roster, and a locomotive rate of 9,301 units. Executives touted the merger as a way to return to volume growth after losing market share to the highway since rail traffic peaked in 2006. We can only go so far independently. We've been losing share to truck, and this is one way to reverse that trend. The combination will unleash growth by eliminating problematic interchanges, speeding and simplifying service, and enabling the railroad to tap the so-called watershed markets along the Mississippi River. Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern envision 1.75% billion in growth-related revenue by the third year of their merger, along with $1 billion in cost and productivity savings. The future nose milling carloads will immediately see a 24 to 48 hour improvement in their transit time. That combination of faster service and greater market reach is powerful, making our transcontinental railroad an attractive choice for both current and future customers. Transcontinental systems traffic opportunities include providing seamless service from coast to coast, and most places in between, for intermodal, finished vehicles, food and beverage, chemicals, and steel shipments. Railroad mergers in the modern era have one thing in common: widespread service problems that occur while meshing operations and information technology systems. Trouble after the mega mergers of the 1990s prompted the STB to impose a merger moratorium while it drew up new review rules. A transaction of this size and scope won't be easy to execute. We understand that. The railroad will maintain an adequate buffer of locomotives and train crews to be able to better respond to service issues. The Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern Colossus will dwarf the independent BNSF and CSX systems, and put them under tremendous pressure to respond. Neither railroad would comment on the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern deal, but it is widely expected that first transcon will spark a second. How the response unfolds is uncertain. BNSF parent company Berkshire Hathaway has a nearly $350 billion cash stockpile. It could tap to fund an acquisition. Will BNSF bid for Norfolk Southern, either seeking it as a merger partner or to merely force Union Pacific to pay a higher purchase price? Will BNSF seek a merger with CSX right away? Or will it seek concessions as part of the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern merger? Then wait to see if regulators approve Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. If Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern gets the green light, BNSF would then be able to make a deal with CSX while knowing the regulatory approval would be a slam dunk. The historic nature of the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern combination was not lost on Boehner. He invoked President Abraham Lincoln, who created the Union Pacific in 1862 with the signing of the Pacific Railroad Act. This combination is transformational. It's a win for the American economy, it's a win for our customers, and it's a win for our people. It builds on President Abraham Lincoln's vision of a transcontinental railroad from nearly 165 years ago. So, a lot of mixed views so far, which is really good and bad at the same time. Now we're going to December, this past month. Where is it? Yes. Alright. Union Pacific Norfolk Southern merger may help, not hurt. May hurt, not help. What could possibly be wrong with the Transcontinental Railroad? First, there exists no financial crisis in the rail industry, like that which drove the significant consolidation in the freight rail industry over the last 30 years. The proposed merger is driven by management and a micro-minority of activist stockholders, not for their benefit of shippers, employees, or even most investors. Second, risk of merger integration and ongoing operational failures of a nationwide rail network is significant. Transcontinental railroads, given their size, are too big to run, but not too big to fail. Finally, the merger puts industrial and commodity shippers at a disadvantage. While previous railroad mergers brought us the safest and most efficient railroad system in the world, it wasn't easy. One of the last of the large mergers was the Union Pacific and Southern Pacific merger in 1996, which brought the total number of Class I railroads down to 7. Shippers, communities, and other railroads went through prolonged hell as the Union Pacific sought to integrate Southern Pacific's IT operations and infrastructure into its network. It was a mess in the West. How will this proposed Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern merger affect shippers? Most shippers fall into two categories: those with no realistic transportation alternatives, like many chemical, grain, and industrial shippers, and those that have other options. For example, intermodal shipments have access to trucking over the highway. The industrial and commodity shipper with no competitive transportation options is covered by railroad rate-making rules that essentially allow railroads to charge what the market will bear, and the Surface Transportation Board can review rates and call balls and strikes. If the acquisition is approved, it will greatly reduce the transportation options for many of these industrial and commodity customers. Proponents of the merger case will argue that eliminating gateways, the locations where freight is handed off between railroads, will move more traffic from the highway to the rail network. But intermodal networks, which move imported goods from Asia and elsewhere, already are highly efficient and create low frictional delays at gateways. There is simply no need for this consolidation to move forward, and plenty of reasons why it should not. European visitors to the United States in the 1830s, our first railroad boom, noted with mild astonishment how we had quickly perfected an American style of railroading and applied it widely and creatively. We sometimes lose sight of the fact that railroading is merely a tool, like the plow or the internet. It provided mobility. Once we realized what mobility could do, we continued to innovate and enlarge the benefits railroads introduced. Until recently, the idea of a truly national railroad would have been absurd on its face. Culturally, we are inclined toward bigness. That was not an attribute the country's founders embraced, and they worried whether it was even feasible to govern a nation stretching from the Atlantic to the Mississippi Valley. Soon enough, though, the country expanded to the Pacific coast. The hope is that the bold moves Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern are making will invite us to poke a bit more deeply into why the merger makes sense, or why it doesn't. Who makes similar moves in response will be based on today's realities and educated guesses as to the future. I find it coincidental that what may be the closing chapter for the American railroad industry is commencing 2 centuries after its first chapter opened. There will be railroading as we know it for some times to come, but it will look less and less like the railroading of even 50 years ago. Whatever unfolds will have precedence in the past. As the industry plots its course forward through increasingly interesting times, it would do well to occasionally glance backward. Technologies may change and markets evolve. The lessons history offers the railroad industry remain timeless if we are smart enough to heed them. So my perspective is that, it would be great for the I mean, of course, Union Pacific Big Boy would be coming to the East Coast. That would be a treasure for those of you who are on the East Coast, but also it would just allow a lot of I think it would provide more seamless service, and yeah, it would be great. You could see some things that you don't see normally for those of you who are in the East or the West even. But yeah, I'm certainly going to keep tabs on this. If I see anything, I'll report on it in the future. And thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.